There were many kinds of heresies that existed in both the ancient and medieval worlds. So even though they were often labeled under the umbrella term of heretic, they all had very different belief systems. So for ease and for this talk, I'm going to move forward using the word heretic as a general term, but there were so many groups. There were Marcionites, there were Paulicians, Valentinians, Waldensians, the Hussites, the Cathars, the heresy of the free spirit, and on and on and on it went. In fact, some of those heresies are now mainline, Main Street Christianity, like Protestantism. Protestantism, we got our word protest from Protestantism. They were protesting the orthodoxy, and people lost their lives over this, and now some of our neighbors are Protestants. Isn't it funny how that works? We have some fairly good evidence that some remote heretical groups used some kind of entheogenic Eucharist in their rites. And let me be clear here, heresy has nothing at all to do specifically with visionary sacraments. I mean, heresy exists outside of any entheogen or psychedelic or anything like that. In fact, I would argue that the majority of heretical groups didn't use psychoactives at all. I think that that's a pretty fair statement. But there are two instances from medieval times, and actually way more in the ancient world, where I think there is very good evidence that some heretics were using entheogenic Eucharists that specifically fed into the stereotype of the satanic witch. So let's go back in time to Orleans, France in 1022. We have some rather intriguing accounts of a pious knight named Arfast who infiltrated a heretical group operating in that area. Their specific beliefs are lost to us, but we do have some chronicles of the trial that scholars believe, and I count myself among them, actually took their facts from earlier court records, like the testimonies from the trial. So that's good primary sourced information. One of these accounts comes from Paul of Saint-Paly de Chartres and reads as follows. The Virgin Mary did not give birth to Christ, and he did not suffer for humanity. Well, let me move this over, assuming you guys don't know so much the Latin side. Moreover, he was not, oh wait, you guys are chasing to that, sorry. Moreover, he was not buried in the sepulchre, and his body did not resurrect. Baptism does not wash away sin, nor do the sacraments of the body and blood of Christ administered by a priest erase sin. Praying to the holy martyrs and speaking to confessors amounts to nothing. Now, not to get too deep into this here, but this group sounds like they were some kind of Docetists with a Donatist understanding of the clergy. What the hell did that guy just say? What were those words? Okay, I don't have as much time to get into Docetism, but during the Q&A, if anyone wants to ask, I'll be more than happy to unpack it. But I'd rather focus here on that second word, that second weird word, Donatism. Donatism was the belief that holding a priestly office did not make anybody holier than thou, right? So a Donatist would rather take the Eucharist from a beggar person on the streets that doesn't have any, theology degree, but is a good person, than they would from a clergyman with 3 degrees in theology, but is kind of an asshole. So that's what Donatism means, okay? And that's why these heretics of Orleans didn't feel that taking communion from a priest had any efficacy because they were Donatists. They didn't need it. You see, the record also indicates that the heretics told Arfast the Knight that instead of needing any Catholic Eucharist, they would share what they called Caelesti Kibo, the heavenly food. Now, the thing about this heavenly food is it sounds very much like an entheogenic experience. But you tell me. When you are sated from eating the heavenly food, you will see angelic visions with us. And sated by that comfort, you will be able to go where you will at your leisure. You will desire nothing, for the omnipotent God is the treasure of all wisdom, and the shine of those riches will never fade. This seems to be a reference to some kind of entheogenic experience, eating something that causes visions of angels and the ability to travel in the mind. Call it a medieval understanding of astral projection, which is how I interpret these lines that I underlined right here. Com ias cuevos locorum sine mora vel difficultate. You will be able to go where you wish at your leisure while seeing angelic visions. You know, I've actually had quite a few mushroom journeys that were something like that, just saying. Anyway, this has the feel of a word we're going to meet later in depth, which is transvection, which is the demonological Latin term for spirit flight or spirit projection. Put this here for you. The thing is, when you get to the part of the dossier that explains what the heavenly food was made from, meaning the recipe, the court reporter tells us something very interesting, and I'm going to read to you real quick from the actual record. This is from the deposition. Before we come to the disputation, I must tell you, those who have not heard, how these people confected the meal which they call heavenly. They meet on certain nights in the house which I have mentioned, each holding a light in his hand, and called a roll of the names of demons, like a litany, until suddenly they saw the devil appear among them in the guise of some wild beast. Then, as soon as they saw the sight, the lights were put out, and each of them grabbed whatever woman came to hand and seized her to be put to ill use. Without regard to sin, whether it were a mother or a sister or a nun, they regarded that intercourse as a holy and religious work. On the 8th day, they lit a great fire among them, and the child who was born of this foul union was put to the test of the flames after the manner of the ancient pagans and burned. The ashes were collected and kept with as much reverence as the Christian religion accords the body of Christ. There was such power of diabolic evil in this ash that anyone who had succumbed to the heresy and tasted only a small quantity of it was afterwards scarcely ever able to direct their mind away from the heresy and back to the truth. Again, that sounds like one hell of an entheogenic experience to me. The idea of gathering in secret to share blasphemous ideas while sampling some probably psychoactive mixture also turns up in the Cottian Alps, which is a range of mountains that divide Italy from France. And this is the range right here. In 1387, a heresy hunter named Anthony Disetto, arrested a heretical preacher named Antonio Galosna in Pinerolo, an Alpine border town on the Italian side of the range. It's actually right around here is where you'll find Pinerolo. Galosna was, of course, tortured into revealing his deeds as a preacher of secret heretical meetings. During one of the interrogations, the inquisitor asked Galosna who among the women of the sect was revered by the rest. Bilia la Castagna, he answered, saying that she carries with her a phial made with a strange potion made from the emissions of a large toad and the ashes of burned hairs, which she mixes around a fire late at night on the eve of Epiphany. Bilia would sip from the bottle and pass it around the table. Once a man drank so much that he almost died. But those who drank a responsible amount would understand all the secrets through visions of this sect and forever be unable to trust Orthodox teaching. Now, later reports would claim that the potion really contained the flesh of murdered children. So go figure. But the original court records, where we have it there, I should have said earlier, it switches to first person, meaning somebody came along and interpolated the text. So I don't actually believe that this was found in the original trial, the original depositions. And I'm not actually alone in that. Now, this account is extraordinary for 3 reasons. Firstly, a woman is in charge of the group. She's revered among the rest. Secondly, she prepares and supplies her community with a drink that contains a poison. They say the emissions from a toad, actually, they say the shit from a toad. This word here, stacore, that actually, it doesn't mean excrement or poop, which would be excrementum or fox. We get feces from that and excrement from the first. It actually does translate to the word shit. So that word I'm not trying to be edgy is what I'm saying. That's actually the direct translation of that word. Anyway, the great Italian scholar Carlo Ginzburg believes that the reference to totem missions probably is a metaphor for the Amanita muscaria mushroom, the famous red-cap, white-flecked mushroom long associated with the European toad that was on the thumbnail for this event. Now, this might not be too far off, and I'm not going to get into it here, but Ginsburg actually gets into the linguistic evidence for this, and I think he makes a compelling case. I would add that our first written mention of mushrooms being called toadstools comes at this same time that this trial was taking place in 1398. Now, the third reason this is important is that it points to that old stereotype about heretics and how they would murder their own children and make ceremonial potions from their remains. Now, I don't have too much time to get into it here. There's actually a very long history about this. And if you're interested in that long history of heretics and the different entheogens they used, as a precursor to the witch stereotype, please check out my book, The Witch's Ointment. I go in depth to into all this stuff. For now, I'd like to move on from the heretics into that second group that served as a foundation for our witch stereotype, and that was the realm of high magic or ceremonial magic. When high magic, meaning astrology, demon invocation,